Yes, my people, welcome back to another episode of the Navvai Shift, where we explore how leaders are navigating transformation in the age of AI. Today, we're joined by Brad Casper, a globally recognized business leader who began his career at Procter Gamble and then went on to lead several major companies and is now the CEO and founder of Heart and Soul Marketing. In just 5 years, Brad has grown the agency into a distinctive force in creativity, technology, and purpose. Brad, it's a pleasure to have you on. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's nice to be invited. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Of course, no, our pleasure for sure. So, Brad, for our viewers not too familiar with yourself and also Heart and Soul Marketing, can you give us a brief introduction, please?
I'll be happy to. As you mentioned in the overview, my career started at Procter & Gamble, where I spent about 16 and a half years in the advertising and marketing department. I went on to become president of a consumer goods company in the United States in New Jersey. And then 3 years later, I was recruited to become CEO of another consumer goods company out in the southwestern part of the United States in Phoenix, which is where I am today. In addition to over 25 years in consumer goods, then I started doing private equity buyouts and flips. And then ultimately in 2015-16, my wife kind of kicked me in the head, figuratively speaking, and said, "Why don't you start your own agency?" Well, I didn't feel comfortable then starting my own agency. I waited 4.5 to 5 years to do that. But ultimately, I got into the advertising business. Well, frankly, because P&G is and was the world's largest advertiser, I've always been around the environment for most of my career, but didn't have the courage to start Heart and Soul until the middle of the pandemic in 2020.
That's amazing. I really do appreciate that insight, Brad. So, of course, when your wife told you initially about potentially starting an agency, what was that catalyst that said, okay, now is the time to actually start?
Well, we had enjoyed a tremendous amount of success in the predecessor agency. We had grown it by almost X in a period of 4.5 years. And at the time, it was obvious that the chief creative officer and I at that firm really felt like there was another way for us to position our marketing services, take it to another level. And we felt the best way to do that was to leave where we were and start our own thing. And if you remember in the middle of the pandemic, and I know you guys are in the United Kingdom, but it was a global phenomenon. And in the United States, it was having a lot of negative political consequences, health consequences, and economic uncertainty consequences. And so a brand like Heart and Soul coming out of the middle of the pandemic seemed like a great opportunity to reframe what an agency could be like as a partner for clients.
And the name Heart and Soul, that's so unique.
Yes.
Where did that stem from?
Well, I don't know if it's an idiom in the United Kingdom, but oftentimes you might hear it in sports, you might hear it in the course of business where they say, "Oh, that player, Messi, he's the heart and soul of a soccer team."
Yes.
It really means the most vital element, the most essence. It shows total dedication, energy, and enthusiasm. And I think, again, in the pandemic, most of us weren't feeling too energetic. It was quite the opposite. We've kind of come to discover that one of our secret sauces as an agency is providing an uncustomary level of energy and enthusiasm on behalf of our clients. And that makes them feel right away like we're some sort of unique partner in whatever marketing or advertising challenge they have. So, when we went out to trademark Heart and Soul, we thought there's no chance we're going to be able to get that. We did.
Amazing. That's a huge W.
Yeah, it was a big dub.
That's nice. I could tell by your energy. It's contagious.
Yeah.
In relation to Heart and Soul, right? What gap in the industry were you aiming to fill? Because there's a lot of other marketing agencies out there. But what were you trying to fill?
Great question. I think obviously starting over as we did, I'm sure you're familiar with the global advertising industry. You've got a lot of these huge holding companies, these massive network agencies where you've got a lot of senior talent at the top of the shop and then a lot of junior talent at the bottom. And a lot of times the clients are interfacing with the younger, less experienced people. Well, our reason for being, we brought together a lot of senior people. We have enough younger people to make sure that we've got that energy, that vitality, and that digital savviness. But I think the gap we were trying to fill was one of extreme strategic insightfulness with disruptive creativity. And we like to think of our agency as being a brand transformation agency. Now, some clients don't need brand transformation. They've got a really strong agency, but those that have come to us have often given us a challenge like, I really need to transform the way that people think of my brand, whether they choose it or not choose it. But the bottom line was, we feel like we're in a position based on our level of experience that we can help clients change the way people think, see, and feel about their brand.
That's amazing. The passion, Brad, I absolutely love it, I must say. And I want to just take it back a little bit, just ever so slightly. So you've had quite a long career at P&G. So what are your early lessons from P&G you say still guide your leadership today?
Procter was, in fact, like a leadership academy. It really was enormously important. And I think one of the things that P&G teaches you is that it's a team sport, that none of us is as strong as all of us. And so as a leader, as I came up through P&G's ranks, it wasn't about being always the smartest person in the room, but finding the smartest people to join you in the room was always key to the success. And I think some of the things that I learned about leadership specifically at P&G, the first thing is most people want a vision of where things are going to be. So you have to envision where we're going to go, whether that's a project or a whole company. The next is that they do want to be energized. Nobody wants to sit on their ass and just be bored and feel like, well, maybe if we're lucky, we'll be successful. No, you want to energize people with the strategies and the tools and the processes that will make them successful. And then lastly, I think the leader's job is to enable them to overcome barriers, challenges, get them the resources, get them the IT, provide them with the knowledge to succeed. And I think that's the thing that was really impressed upon me at Procter & Gamble. And P&G really rewarded doers, not just talkers. And I think I've learned over the years that it's the people who do things, who take a risk, an intelligent risk, those are the ones that get ahead.
Shout out P&G.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, I certainly want to say thank you for giving us the understanding of the foundation and, of course, the background and the fact that you saw gaps in the market and you built something on that, which is quite new. And from, of course, my understanding with knowing people in the agency industry, some of them are facing tighter budgets, fragmented media and, rising client expectations. In those early days, what was the hardest part about breaking through?
In the early days of Heart and Soul, or the early days when I was starting marketing and advertising back at P&G?
Advertising at P&G. And if there was any hard times that were at Heart and Soul as well?
Well, if I go back to the early days at P&G was a multi-billion-dollar machine. And you always, they almost always took a blank slate at the end of every year and the beginning of the next year. You had to prove that the money you were going to spend in marketing and advertising was going to be justifiable. So you had to do an incredible amount of analysis, show the insights, and justify that the money you spent last year, you need all of that and possibly even more. So I think P&G really trained us in those days to fight for every dollar and justify the investment. Now, fortunately, P&G had a positive bias and believed that advertising could change the way that people live, work, and play. And so at least you have that going for you, knowing that the company has a predisposed bias in favor of advertising. Then it was up to you to prove that the monies that you needed were going to be spent as smartly as possible. I think what I have discovered, now several decades later, starting Heart and Soul, many of our clients also have that same attention to detail. They have fixed budgets, but some of them have never spent money in marketing or advertising. We might be their first agency ever. And so we have to be, again, very data-driven, but in some cases, we have to convince them that the benefits of their product or service are differentiating, are worth it, and let's spend behind it, and then let's show how we can grow. It's rare when you find a company that isn't interested in growth. So that's something we all have going for us, is that companies say, no, I'm not satisfied with the status quo. I need to grow. And then we are able to try to convince them that the way to grow is through building their brand, building that brand equity up, giving consumers a benefit that meets their needs better than somebody else's, and then giving them permission to believe, some sort of proof points that we're better, we're different, and we're going to continue to do that. So some of the same challenges I face now in the 2020s are similar to what I faced 30 or 40 years ago.
That's amazing. And I think for me it kind of seems like a lot of these people that come to, they understand what the issue is and they want to get to the gold, and you're here to basically providing that shovel in some ways.
Yeah, very much so. I love that expression. And I think it helps that they know that I've been digging gold for a long time in a lot of different backyards and in a lot of different industries. I think one of the advantages that I have is that in addition to consumer products, I've worked in financial services. And at one time, and I don't think I mentioned this, I was president of the Phoenix Suns basketball team. So I also ran a professional NBA team as well. That diversity of expertise and experiences helps clients, because they say, God, if he's gone into this situation and solved that, then I think I can count on him to help me in our situation too.
100%, Brad. I see there in that message about the gold and bringing a shovel. I can imagine you walking with very heavy pockets of the gold for sure. I was going to ask, was there a moment in time that kind of made you want to leave that big corporation and actually start your own firm and own businesses?
Oh, that's a really good question. The answer is yes. I had to make a major pivot, because the last job as CEO, and there's a European company that you may be familiar with called Henkel, Henkel. They are based in Dusseldorf, Germany. They acquired the company I was the CEO of in the United States, and I ran that 5.5 years underneath their umbrella. I found not just the cultural difference of working for a German-held company to be a little bit more difficult than if I was running my own shop. But Arizona, where I am from now, I had a choice. I either had to move away and reinvent myself in another city or state, or I had to reinvent myself as not just a big company guy, because I was running a $2 billion company at the time, and there weren't any other opportunities similar to that in Arizona. So I took the latter, which was, I've got to reinvent myself and convince people that I can be an entrepreneur, because in these large companies, I was an intrapreneur, becoming entrepreneurial in a large and sometimes structured organization. And I was able to make that pivot, but it wasn't easy, because I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the budgets that I was once accustomed to. So it took a while to get used to being passionate about a company that was $100 million US instead of $2 billion. And I've learned over time, and I think some of your listeners would appreciate this, the number of zeros that are behind your P&L or behind your revenue is not that important. If you love what you're doing and you believe in what you're doing, it's not the size of the company that matters, it's the size of the challenge within your company that matters.
On that topic of loving what you do, right? Often a lot of people on the journey, they sometimes get distracted by things. But what advice would you give to founders who feel stuck on growth or maybe retention within their business?
Yeah, both of those are great. And last year, Heart and Soul grew at about 75%. And we had an amazing year. It was a lot of fun. And we started this year with a similar growth pattern. And then, as you probably have observed from the United Kingdom to the US, there's been a lot of uncertainty, political uncertainty, geographic uncertainty, changes in policies, tariffs, of course, you all have heard about. It has disrupted the flow of business in the United States. And the most recent economic data that's coming out of Washington suggests that, yes, our economy is slowing down, et cetera, and therefore companies like my own are slowing down too. I think one of the big learnings I had, Joshua, was that if for some reason you hit a stall point, meaning you're not growing like you want to or expect to, or you find out that you're not getting the same great results you did a year ago or a month ago using using the same strategies and tactics, you've got to take a hard look at what you're doing and how you're doing it, and be willing to modify either maybe not so much what you stand for, but how you communicate what you stand for. You can't be complacent. You've got to get out there and say, well, damn it, last year I grew at 75%. That doesn't mean I'm guaranteed to grow at 75% this year. And I was on a call earlier this morning, a CEO roundtable, where we were discussing what are the changes that CEOs are making? What are the different levers that people are pulling to get different results? A lot of people are finding it very unsatisfying to do cold emails, using LinkedIn and Sales Navigator or cold calling people. People are deaf. They're not paying attention. You've got to create something that makes them want to pay attention to you. And so I'm still figuring that out as to what I need to do differently to change that growth curve again.
100%. I definitely agree with you for sure. And Brad, just kind of touched on that. I know, so you said last year there was 75% growth within the business. So I know scaling an agency often means balancing creativity with, of course, processes. Where do you see that balance tip the wrong way?
That's a really good point. I think, last year, obviously, when you're growing that rapidly, there's that expression, you're building the plane as you're flying it. And therefore, sometimes processes take a back seat to just hard work and putting more bodies and more time and attention against an effort. And then when things start to settle down, you can kind of re-engineer the process to see if you can get more efficiency and get more work done with less effort. I think that's what we've been trying to do in 2025. We do an annual employee survey to find out, what are the key strengths and key opportunities within our company. And it's no mistake that process suffered historically, and we needed more robust processes and tools so that we can get people to, frankly, do the work in the most efficient way. So we make constant changes internally about how we meet. In the agency business, we call them scrums, a little bit like rugby, where everybody kind of comes together in a huddle. We do those virtually with Zoom techniques, etc. But we've become a lot more efficient in how we use team time. We still believe it's important to get everybody together, but then we use a tool to program people's work online so that they know, okay, here are the deliverables I have. I've been allocated 2 hours or 3 hours or 5 hours for that task. And so it's now using software to help us drive more efficiency and accountability.
Really do appreciate that insight, Brad. Brad, I know kind of as you're speaking now, I feel like so when you was the president of a basketball team, you felt there's a lot of transferable skills in actually running a business and being a leader in a business, because I feel like there has to be a lot of synergies.
Yeah, I go back to even my days as a 17 or 18-year-old. I was a pretty good athlete in American football and basketball. And when you're competing in sports, and if you're thought of as the captain of your team, you already begin to develop that leadership presence, that charisma, that voice in the huddle. And a lot of that transfers right to business when you graduate from college, and I found that to be the case. Once you become comfortable leading and being seen as the guy who's going to make it happen, or the girl that's going to make it happen, it becomes a lot more comfortable and a lot less, it's not less challenging, it's just less uncomfortable. I think so. What I found is I moved between different companies in different industries, frankly, including basketball. A lot of those leadership skills, and always the interpersonal skills of how to motivate people, how to align people, how to get people to have critical conversations without taking things personally. Those skills, those softer skills, are very transferable across industries. And I think I discovered that after I've made 2 or 3 moves. I said, okay, these are the things that have really worked in my playbook. I am not going to turn my back on what has worked. I'm going to use them again. And I just have to show people how it applies to a basketball team or a private equity-backed company.
You missed the game?
That's a really good question. Yes and no. I'm way too old to play anything, although I now have, 3 adult sons and daughters, and now I have grandkids. So I've got a lot to look forward to in terms of sports over the next several years. I don't, because my need to compete, I still have in business. I don't have to have sports competition in order to flex that muscle of competition. I still like to win games, even if it's with my family. I always play to win, not to lose. So that's maybe why I don't miss that form of competition anymore. But going to an arena, being in there with fans and being there with sponsors, that was a lot of fun. You can get really juiced up. And if your team's playing really well, there's probably nothing better.
Amazing. That's amazing. I wanted to touch on, I wanted to say thank you. You've created like a clear picture of the challenges. And I wanted to touch on like the segment. One of like the biggest disruptors shaping that picture is now artificial intelligence. So
yes.
As you know, artificial intelligence, it promises efficiency and creativity, but the challenge is, where it truly adds value. So how is it you guys are utilizing this beautiful tool that we have at our fingertips?
Yeah, I tell you, artificial intelligence is something that both excites me and scares me. The frontier of AI keeps changing every day. There's a new app, there's a new technology, there's a new phone call. Hey, have you tried this? And it's bewildering. It's overwhelming, frankly. And so I have to shut out about 80 or 90% of it. That being said, because I come from a different generation than you all in terms of your youth, I know I'm never going to be the master AI conqueror. But I have a young organization of people between 25 and 35 and 40 for whom it does feel more intuitive. It feels more obvious. And so I see my role is to make sure that there's a lot of experimentation going across the enterprise. And I'm delighted to say that we've got AI hacks. Almost everybody has 1, 2, 3, or 4 different tools that they're regularly using. A lot of it invisibly. Most of it doesn't manifest itself in terms of a final deliverable to our client, but it does make us a little more efficient. It makes us more productive. It makes us smarter. Whether it's, summarizing a client status meeting using an AI tool that summarizes it and produces it, or doing research before you have a RFP in this country. I don't know if you have RFPs in the United Kingdom, but a request for proposal. When you're solicited to come into a meeting, I'm doing a podcast right now. Thanks. Sorry about that, guys.
Okay.
But in any case, the RFP, sometimes we can take the RFP, put it through an artificial intelligence filter to say, what are the most essential things that this client is asking for? And then we go ahead and use that as a checklist as to whether or not we've been able to deliver on those. So I'm really pleased to say that a lot of experimentation is going on. I think we're getting a lot of success, but here's the thing I said to my EVP yesterday. I think we got to do a better job of systemizing AI, making it more integrated rather than a bunch of individuals working in almost silos. How do we find tools that will make us as an enterprise more efficient and effective, and a little more transparent? So that's some work that's still ahead of us.
Amazing.
Yeah, of course.
Brad, just to answer your question, we'll have a conversation after this, just in relation to that.
Okay.
Amazing. But agencies sometimes worry that, clients won't trust artificial intelligence or AI-driven work. So how do you, of course, manage that balance?
Maybe it's the clients that we are speaking to right now, or we have about 20 different clients. Most of them are not asking us, how are you using AI, or what in terms of the deliverables that you've just shared with me, how much of that was instigated by or developed using AI. We haven't had those hard conversations. I'm sure if we do get asked, we'll be more than happy to share. I think about a year or two ago with one of the AI platforms, Midjourney, which helps people with the graphic arts capability, instead of getting some storyboard artist to come in and draw storyboards for us, we used Midjourney to create a real facsimile of what a 30-second commercial could look like. When we showed it to the client, they said, my God, is that a real person, or is that AI? And we said that's AI. And we would never use it as a substitution. I know some agencies and some clients are absolutely putting AI product in front of consumers to have them make choices based on that. We have not done that. We've used it as a tool to help us frame the idea, and then we fall back on our own ingenuity, our own creativity, our own art and copywriting. So I can confidently say we're using AI tools to support us, but not replace us.
Oh, sorry, I was talking, but I was on mute. Jesus, excuse me.
No worries.
This is where I kind of think the issue is, because I think a lot of people have fears and concerns that AI is actually here to take over what we're doing. But the people that are optimized and become the most efficient are the people that understand it's actually here to complement. And if you use it as a complementation tool, then you'll scale much, much more faster for sure. But I was going to ask, where have you seen the biggest efficiency gain so far with the use of AI?
I think it might be really in the areas of research and helping us better understand the competitive landscape, the white space that might exist for our clients' brands or services. And then in some cases, maybe when we kind of cross-pollinate what I call the industry environment with maybe a cultural take, we might be able to find insights that allow us to then come up with a strategy or a creative brief that leads to something that's disruptive. We've been doing this. We hit on something just recently in the last 2 or 3 weeks with one of our bigger clients in the food industry, and we used AI to help us kind of frame an idea, and then we hand wrote a narrative that came from that idea, and the client goes, ooh, that's really different. That's really exciting. I could see how my brand could play in that. So I think it's in the upfront, although I'm sure that, some of the print ads and digital ads, our art directors, our graphic designers, our copywriters, I'm sure they're getting, again, some nuggets from AI that make their final product better. But I can say, because I'm not the creative, I'm not the chief creative officer, I'm more of a chief strategy officer, I can absolutely say at the upfront that we're really reaping the benefits of AI on the strategy, on the research, and getting to ideas quicker.
That's amazing. And then, Brad, I kind of want to flip the question a little bit. So what risk and limitations have you kind of ran into with dealing with AI?
I think across our enterprise, there are some people who are intimidated by it. There are probably some people who feel like still prefer to do it my way, whether I had a post on LinkedIn the other day about Taylor Swift and how she writes songs, and she has 3 different pens that she writes songs with depending on the mood and the vibe that she's feeling. I think that we have art directors and copywriters who have been doing it a certain way for a while, and therefore they see the interface of a ChatGPT or something else as kind of a stranger in their backyard, and they're not sure what to do with it. But I'm, of course, speaking on their behalf. I think it's just the adoption of a new tool or a new technique that may represent initially a threat. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. One of the biggest risks is if we don't try, we don't know what we're missing. But on the other hand, I still think that there is, and you might have seen these articles in Western Europe too, a lot of entry-level jobs are being replaced by AI. Now people are saying, well, if we replace those entry-level jobs, how are we going to develop the next group of people who are going to be those middle managers, et cetera, if they haven't had an opportunity to come up through the pyramid?
Yeah. And I guess that kind of leads to when you're kind of from now with college students and students that are in these ages, they have to kind of change their way they're trying to learn and what things they actually need to kind of process to actually, when they move into the actual careers, it's not the same as moving in 10 years ago. It's a complete different story, and people kind of have to keep up with the times or get left behind, unfortunately.
Very much so. In fact, it's funny you should say, in about 2 hours, I'm having an interview with a young lady who is in an agency, but not my agency. She's on the East Coast. She's looking to make a career move. She sent me her resume or her CV for my review. And the thing that was so obvious to me was she doesn't mention anything about AI at all in her skills, her certifications, her training, or how she does business. And we all know these days, if you are blind to it, you may get left behind or ignored.
And Brad, as a leader, when people are giving you resumes now, these are the sort of things you are looking for?
I would say that this is one of the first I've looked at in 2 or 3 months, and I think I'm just hypersensitized right now that with so many things going on in the AI world, and this is the second or third phone call, roundtable, or Zoom call I've done over the past 10 days that AI has played a central theme in the conversation. So I think I'm more inclined to look at it right now. But if people aren't using it, it makes me wonder how relevant they're going to be.
That's true. That's amazing. Yeah. And I kind of, if AI could solve just one marketing challenge in the next 5 years, which one would you choose?
You didn't tell me you were going to ask that. I don't know that one.
Cheeky curveball, Brad.
Let's put it this way.
That's a tough.
I was just gonna say, Brad, you've had conversations with a lot of CEOs, these roundtables.
Yes.
Of course, I know you said AI has been the hot topic. So, no, something might have sprung out of that could have, could be a light bulb a moment.
If I look at it through the lens of a marketing or advertising agency, the one thing that is always true is that there's never enough in your pipeline. Even if you've got 5 prospects, you wish you had 10. If AI could really help identify the right client or prospective client for an agency and allow us to cut through all the BS so we can go from a warm introduction to a great partnership, I would say AI would have just broken the sound barrier.
Definitely, no, I totally do agree for sure. But no, I really do appreciate that fascinating look into AI in action. And I kind of want to just kind of move just ever so slightly into the actual industry itself. And I know, of course, consumer attention is fragmented, trust harder to win, and of course, regional differences definitely do matter more than ever. So what is the biggest concerns you're hearing from CMOs today?
I think with the recent change in the economy in the US, I think the concerns are about fixed budgets and wanting to do a lot more, but then having less to do it with. That would be the first thing I hear CMOs do. The second thing is, particularly if you're selling a consumer product, it's one thing to sell a luxury item. The people who are in the luxury segment, who buy luxury goods and services, the economy isn't really an issue for them. But it's the other 85 or 90% of the population for whom value or price is important. And you can have a really well-established brand and a premium price, and people will say, hey, that's a trusted product. It is expensive, but it's worth it because that value is because I know what it's going to do for me or my family. The opposite end is a lot of retailers, and of course Sainsbury and a lot of the UK retailers are very good at private label or own brand. It's those brands that are not retailer brands and they're not the premium market leader. They're the challenger brand that's in between them. That's a big issue right now because they don't have as much money to spend as the market leader. They don't have the shelf space that the retailer sets aside for them. And I think they're trying to convey what they stand for and why they deserve a seat at the table with less dollars and maybe a less clear value equation. So I think that CMOs are really thinking, how do I play a value card when historically I haven't needed to?
I'm with you. And I wanted to pick your brain about this, Brad. But in terms of like the US market, would you say there's a lot of differences, or is there any differences between the UK market and the US market when it comes to like marketing in general?
When I was at Procter, I had a global job and I was a lot more familiar with the marketing environment in Western Europe and in the United Kingdom than perhaps today, because most of my clients are US or North American based, like Mexico, Canada. But I think one of the things that I can say from my global job at P&G is that we're all a lot more similar in our needs and our wants than we are different. And a lot of people try to put a magnifying glass on what makes us different when 85% of us may all want or need the same thing. And so I would say, based on that, Joshua, that it's entirely possible that our marketing environments, although different between the United Kingdom and the US, they're more similar than they are different, and therefore a lot of the same insights, tools, and practices will work on both sides of the ocean.
Amazing, amazing. And I was going to also ask, bro, I know agencies kind of often chase trends, and I think that's kind of been a common thing that we've kind of seen as well, to be honest with you. But how do you kind of help clients focus on what actually really does drive outcomes?
That's a really great question. In fact, I had a post about that in LinkedIn recently, that sometimes I think, and I have to sometimes tell our clients, don't get too infatuated with social media and the clicks and the likes and some of the things. There are cultural trends that are going to spin, and you can jump on a bandwagon. But at the end of the day, you need to define what your brand is going to stand for over time, and that shouldn't change too much based on trends. What you need to do is, how do you make your brand and your benefit relevant as trends change? One of the brands that I used to work on was Tide laundry detergent in the United States. Ariel, it's the equivalent of Ariel in the United Kingdom. And one of the things that I proudly said is P&G, when they launched Tide after World War II, it went to market leader in like 1948. It's been the market leader for 77 years. You talk about a winning streak. That's a hellacious winning streak. But they never lost sight of the fact that they were going to be that gold standard, that standard of excellence in cleaning and odor, protection and things like that. And if you find a benefit that is generally timeless, then your brand has a chance to be timeless as long as your marketing and your advertising of that message stays fresh. And that's where it intersects with sometimes cultural trends. So I would tell people, don't chase a trend. Be relevant within the trend, but make sure that what your brand stands for doesn't change too much.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's what people end up purchasing in, because they like the brand, they know the brand, they trust the brand. So when the brand can visually show what they're standing for, that's what creates that repeat customer and that loyalty at the end of the day.
Yes, for sure.
I was going to ask her, what's one thing you think brands that spend money on today that actually does deliver little real value?
Delivers very little value. I'm sure there's a lot going on that I'm not even aware of. I don't know. I may want to pass on that. I can't, because it's just such a wide open thing. I'm sure there's a lot of waste that I'm not aware of. I try to minimize that with our clients, so I apologize. Okay.
Yeah, I kind of want to just move on to the next thing, kind of looking ahead, the future of agencies and also AI. So what's the next big experiment or investment for Heart and Soul?
I'm sure we will continue. I mean, we've got a number of promising new opportunities on the immediate horizon from a new client standpoint that could provide that next 20% level of growth. I'm sure we will probably look at continuing to hire great people to meet that demand. But I think we will also say, how could an AI tool or tools assist us and get us to that level of effectiveness and efficiency without having to add as much headcount as we would historically do? So I would say the next big investment might be, unless we decide to make an acquisition, and that's always a possibility, a merger and acquisition. Setting that aside, I would think that one of the biggest investments might be in some sort of, I don't know if it would be proprietary AI, but I know a lot of companies and a lot of holding companies are spending a ton of money on AI, proprietary AI tools, and by the time they've beta tested it and got it working, it's already been replaced by something else. We're not of the size or the scale or the effectiveness to be able to do that. So I'm willing to take off-the-shelf tools, customize them for our needs, and I think that's probably the next investment.
And then for agencies that don't adapt, what do you think the biggest risk are for them?
If agencies don't adapt, what becomes of them?
Yeah, what's the biggest risk for them?
Obsolescence and shrinking to a point of so little critical mass that they can't survive. I know of some local agencies that I think are going to face that in the United States within the next year. I think you're going to see some smaller shops, particularly with baby boomers who are leading that company. They'll probably, in a panic because of AI, they will probably try to sell and get out while they still have some value in their company. But I think there's going to be a real shakeout in the advertising and marketing space over the next 2 years. I think as much shakeout as we've ever seen.
It's all gonna unfold. I'm gonna see it present in the moment. But Brad, on a personal note, What ambitions excite you in the next chapter?
I'm at that age that I'm torn between the things that are happening in my family. Like I had my first granddaughter 2 months ago.
Congratulations.
Amazing.
A grandson coming in 2 weeks. It's going to be balancing those important things that, time eventually is going to steal that away from me. So I have to make sure that I don't punt an opportunity to be present with family when they all live in Arizona. I've got to make sure of that. At the same time, I consider my company my family or extended family, and I want to make sure that I'm equally present for them. So I think that the next several years, it's finding that right balance of being present in both and obviously never taking my eye off the corporation so that it falls behind. And if that means finding other people who are younger and more energetic to join me in this journey and possibly even help replace me, that's always an option. But I'm not ready to give up anything at this stage.
I can definitely tell for sure, bro, 100%. And then last but not least, what's one action a business leader could actually take this week to improve their marketing effectiveness in the next 90 days?
Well, I think every marketing company that is not unsatisfied with their business results can ask the question, and I'm sure this is relatively true of corporations in the UK and Europe too. A lot of them have tried to bring that creative expertise in-house, and some are effective and some are not. Some of them have to go back out and hire an agency. If you're not satisfied with the results you're getting, take a hard look at the partners that you have around you. Do you need a breath of fresh air, a new agency that brings fresh thinking, fresh strategy? And maybe it's just a project. Maybe it's just an experimentation with another agency. But don't be afraid to bring in some outsider point of view. And if any of them need heart and soul, call me.
I love it. Now, Brad, this has been a very, very fun and enjoyable conversation. I really do appreciate for joining us and sharing such valuable insight and leadership and the future that you're actually creating in marketing. For our listeners, for our viewers and our listeners, how can they learn more about Heart and Soul?
Our website is gotheartandsoul.com. And, I'm Brad Casper, like the friendly ghost. So I'm Brad, B-R-A-D, at heartandsoulmktg.com, so they can email me, and I'm one of those crazy guys who answers every frickin' email.
It doesn't play games. Now, Brad, honestly, we really did thoroughly enjoy this conversation. Much appreciated again for your time, and thank you to my co-host Josh. It's another episode of Navvai Shift, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
All right, thanks guys. Take care. Cheers.